Today on the Authors Exchange, the best half-hour conversation you're going to hear on the web. Author of Dawson Junior G3, Brian the Wagstaff, all the way from the UK. I'm glad they did, because I've thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I've thoroughly enjoyed foraying into that world, but not least of which because, it really, I think, as I said in the review, I think it's a cautionary tale about what we're doing in COVID-19. I think, by taking a look at this book, it might scare you out of your house and help you start socializing a little bit.
Yes.
Has anybody talked to you a little bit about, I went to the bar last night because I read your book?
No, not yet.
No? Okay, good. The Authors Exchange. Your host, Captain Christopher German. Brought to you by The Charted Life. And sponsored by Whither We Tend, a novel by Captain Christopher German. Welcome to The Authors Exchange. Hey there, folks. This is Captain Christopher German for The Authors Exchange. We are the best half-hour conversation you're going to find on the web. And today we're going across the pond over to England to talk with Brian the Wagstaff. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this guy. Wag is the pen name for this gentleman. It's his nickname. He is Brian Wagstaff, and he hopes that the shorter moniker will give you a more memorable and amusing connotation of his name. Wag has spent most of his life attempting to teach English to foreign students, but in recent years has started writing short stories. These have appeared in several magazines, most notably The Scribe, Breaking Rules Publishing. He also writes a column, Wag on Writing, for The Scribe, for advice for writers on aspects of their craft. He lives in Cambridge, UK, on the colorful side of town, and can be found staring dreamily at his computer screen, hoping that something useful will transpire. Please visit Wag's website, wagwriter.com, for further information about his work, and please leave a comment so he knows you have dropped by. But before we go any further, we're going to start talking about this book, Dawson Junior 3G. And I'm not going to tell you about the book. I'm going to have him tell you about the book, because the author is the best person to talk to about their books, right? Brian, why don't you tell us what do we need to know in a digested version about Dawson Junior 3G on this very early morning, all the way over there in England where it's afternoon?
Dawson Junior G3 is the name. It is a story about a door, and it's also the name of the door. It's an artificially intelligent door which runs a protection system, a defense system for a house, and can pulverize any intruder and disarm any suspect package that might be delivered. It's a story set in the 24th century when people, in addition to having doors like this, have companions. Companions are artificially intelligent robots, indistinguishable from real women and men, except for a little socket in between the collarbones, which is where the solar cloak that charges them plugs in. Apart from this little socket, they're just like real men and women. They're designed partly by genetic engineers. And they do the housework and also provide any sexual services or whims that the owner, male or female, might desire. The only problem with companions is that obviously men and women no longer want to meet up, because companions are better lovers, better conversationalists, better friends. The only thing that companions can't do is make and have babies. So the state tries to encourage, in fact forces, men and women to meet up and encourages them to marry much against the human's will, in order to increase the population. And the protagonist of my story, Frank Mayfield, finds himself forced to marry a woman he does not love, when accidentally he meets another real female from a very, very different belief system, who opens his eyes to the limitations of his society. But will he have a chance to make a life with his new soulmate, or will he be forced into marriage with the woman that he doesn't want?
And I assume you're going to force us to read the book to find out. And we're not going to tell you how the book ends today.
I'm afraid so. No spoilers.
Well, that's a good thing, because we don't want to give away the good parts of the book. We just want to get people enticed enough with this program to watch or to read the story. And quite frankly, I got to take a look at this book. And one of the things that really hit me home about this book is this is scarily, eerily appropriate to the COVID-19 world we live in right now. And I think I put that in your review. Did you get a chance to take a look at that?
Yes, you
did.
But
with COVID-19, we are really isolated from each other, and we are scared of each other. And that's really, I think, one of the things that's going on in this book was the ultimate. The company that designed this door, I think you talk a little bit about that, designed the door because it created this fear in people's minds, and that's how it started selling. Is that what kind of when did you start writing this book? Was this something pre-COVID, or was this something that
it was pre-COVID? And it's entirely coincidental that COVID happened. I've had the idea for many, many years, largely because I kept on being annoyed that when I was out at work, I'd come home and there'd be a little slip inside my door saying that there was a parcel for me and I had to go to some collection point far away. And I kept on thinking, wow, what we really need is a door for that, an artificially intelligent door, and it could do all these other things. And every morning in my bath with clouds of steam around me, I'd sort of dream about this, and the door would get more elaborate. And I'd think what this society would be about. So it's a product of many years. And then in September 2019, I started writing it.
And you went through the logical route of I'm going to blow people up with my front door. That's just the logical outcome.
Well, I realized the more I thought about this door that it was a wonderful idea, but it would have the effect of isolating people.
Yes.
And I thought that there was I'd hit on something about human nature, that we all want to be more and more self-reliant. We don't want to have to rely on other people. And yet, other people provide us with our greatest joy.
Yes, they do.
So,
but that's actually what's really interesting about this book is one of his greatest consternations about life is other people, but he desperately wants to be with other people at the same time.
Yes.
And the dichotomy of his spirit in this whole thing is he's actually, and I'm not going to give you the ending of this book. You got to take a look at it. But one of the things that I found is he tries to do it. He tries to break off and become a normal human being, and the system refuses to allow him. The door won't allow his companions in, his girlfriend's in. The door his companions are linked to the door, and they could encourage him to not go out and not go because it's so dangerous out there. And the whole system is trying to keep him in the building, is it not?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and that's essentially, we're not that far off right now, are we? Don't go outside. Don't talk to your neighbors. Yes. If you do catch the COVID, you have to go sit in your room alone and nobody can talk to you. So this is you just hit on the perfect time to come out with this book right now.
It was the perfect time. As I say, it wasn't part of the inspiration of the story at all, but I think it lent an added poignancy. By the time I was writing the most intense passages about basically human loneliness. We were deep into lockdown, and that provided the kind of atmosphere that I needed, I think, the impetus.
Fomented the ideas, did it not?
Yes, it did. It did. Yes.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick little break here because we've got to pay a few bills, and we have some new sponsors that are joining the team today, so I have to make sure I get those in. But when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about your writing career and how you got into the whole self-publishing thing and how you did all that kind of thing. So stand by, and we'll be right back after.
Live from the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, California, the Cinemaniacs Podcast! Hello, and welcome to the Cinemaniacs Podcast. Each week on the Cinemaniacs, we cannonball into the world of the silver screen. We're joined by the best movie critics in any cinematic universe. I'm Lewis, and he's Aiden. Why don't you sit right here? And yeah, let's just cannonball right into this thing. So I end up sitting on his lap as he's driving this tractor. Oh my goodness. The Cinemaniacs Podcast! Podcast!
Birthdays and anniversaries come once a year, so it's okay to be a little shellfish. Don't be boring and send those usual gifts. LobsterAnywhere.com can give you the best gifts to crack a birthday smile. LobsterAnywhere.com has dozens of awesome seafood packages, many with free express shipping. You get the real lobster experience anywhere you would like. No box of chocolates or frozen steaks can deliver the same thing. So reserve now and pick your delivery date today and order your lobster today at thechartedlife.net/awgeez. Brought to you by LobsterAnywhere.com. Hey, welcome back. And today we have really the WAG. He uses that short name. It's Brian Wagstaff, and it is Dawson Junior G3, and that's the name of the book. And it's a really cool tale about isolation, about not trusting your neighbors anymore, and it all comes in the form of a door. But Brian has actually had a very, very long writing history, a career in writing. And I want to talk to him a little bit more about that, because that's a fascinating aspect of this, is that, he's been thinking about this idea for the longest time, and all of a sudden it came out into the book form. But Brian, tell me a little bit, how'd you get into writing, and how did you launch off in this thing to wander down the path to Dawson Jr.?
I've always wanted to be a writer. Well, not quite always. I first wanted to be an admiral, but then people explained to me, patient adults explained to me that you had to start by being a sailor, and the first step was you swabbed the decks, and then I lost all interest in a naval career. So my second choice was to be a writer. And my mother patiently explained that being a writer is not a very financially secure idea. You need a second string to your bow, she said, and she was quite right. So after having promised myself and the world in general that the only thing I would never, ever do was to be a teacher, I drifted into education. And I taught English to speakers of other languages for many years, and then drifted into becoming a writing examiner for speakers of other languages and stuff like that. I never really abandoned writing. I wrote stories, I wrote poems, I wrote scripts for the BBC, which they monotonously returned to me. And then a few years ago, I decided that maybe I needed the sort of narrative voice that goes along with telling short stories and novels and so on. And I took a course in writing, a master's in creative writing at the Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge,
Uh-huh.
which was good because it got me comparing notes with other writers and getting some friends who would be good beta readers for me. And
I did a similar thing to that. When I,
you?
I've got a journalism degree, and I kind of avoided that and became a sailor for a long time. I didn't want to become an admiral. I didn't make it into the military either, but I did want to. I've always had this inkling to write, but I had a tough time getting the creative juices flowing, and I couldn't get my mojo happening. So what I did is I went to UCLA, and I took a course at UCLA to get my creative juices flowing, and they flowed forth, man. I can't stop now. So, but could you read me a little something? I love to hear the books in the author's voice.
Shall I read you the first couple of pages?
Yeah. Pick a couple pages out and let's read through it. I'll stop you when it's gone too long.
Okay. The door of number 81 Oak Avenue flashed all its red lights and sounded its hazard guidance repeatedly. Warning, potential threat. Do not approach door until lights stop flashing. Do not proceed beyond gate. Warning. All owners of doors were obliged by law to have gates far enough away to ensure the safety of innocent passers-by in the event of an explosion or other mishap during a door encounter. The drone, whose proximity had triggered the warning, hung, busily whirring, as it initiated the greeting protocol and waited for a response. The door analyzed the drone's electronic bona fides, giving the origin of its journey, the purpose of its visit, and its protestation of peaceful intent, PPI. The PPI was a standard electronic form which stated that the drone bore no weapons or other threats and no illegal products. Cautiously satisfied that the bona fides were in order, the door slid down a protective cover, allowing a slot to appear through which a large shelf emerged. The drone came to rest on this, cutting its engines.
Because that, I think, really shows you the length that people go to in this book to keep their neighbors out of their homes. I was thinking as I was reading this, is like this would work really where I'm in Utah right now, and Utah is we have more cows than people out here, and it is really spread out. So if you just had all these houses all spread out, and that's one of the things I think was really good about me in COVID land, is being as isolated as we are out here. Was one of the smartest things we ever did is get away from society and those tucked in close areas where everybody's getting so sick because they're so close to each other. But let's take another quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about these two lovely assistants that your character has, and we'll talk about why the population is plummeting in the land of Dawson Jr. When we come back for the next break.
We got our solo stove this past fall, and boy, do we love it. It's super easy to use, it's portable, and best of all, it's super safe in areas that are fire prone like we are here in the Southwest. We have loved having this thing in our yard, and you'll enjoy it too. This week, the Solo Stove Ranger Backyard Bundle is regular price $489.99. You can get a deal on it for $364.99. Save $125 with free shipping and returns. Solo Stoves, available at thechartedlife.net/awgeez. On the Authors Exchange, we're trying to talk to some authors about their books, but every once in a while, we can help you with your relationships.
Men everywhere, if you're looking for something that you need to entertain your wife with, and you want to find something that is going to touch her heart, this, I think, is a great opportunity as such. Get the book, give it to her, write your name in it, and say, you know what, Daniel gave these poems to me, and I'm going to give them to you, and it'll get you out of Dutch if you're in Dutch with your wife.
I tell every guy I know, use this book.
Use the book. And welcome back. And there's something that's very telling about this book, particularly with respect that we mentioned in the last segment, the population is dropping. And the population is dropping because people aren't finding each other attractive anymore. They're not necessarily copulating and they're not making babies. And what they're doing instead of that is they have these assistants, and you can get any kind of assistant you want. You can have a male, you can have a female. It can be fat, skinny, tall, thin, red-haired, brown-haired, whatever you want. You can design it, and they will build it for you and set it to keep you inside your home. Would you have stayed home in COVID-19 land if you didn't have to go out and talk to other people, didn't have that urge to go make babies and that kind of thing? Let's talk a little bit about that right now. Can we, Brian?
Yeah, certainly companions with capital C, these robots, would have made self-isolation more bearable. But as it is, I live alone, and being isolated, I was actually shielded, was tough. But real other people are preferable to companions, no matter how advanced the companions are.
Why is that?
Well, there's a point where, just trying to make sure that I'm not giving away anything at this point, there's a point where having had sex with a real woman, although not one of his society, she asks him, how does that compare to a robot? Slightly aggressively. And he says much, much better. And she probes him, and he says, well, it's nothing to do with the flesh, because the feeling is exactly the same. Nothing to do with dryness or moisture or anything like that. What it is to do with, and he has to think quite carefully at this point, is reacting to somebody else.
Yeah.
If you have a companion, she, if you're a man, or he, if you're a heterosexual woman or whatever, automatically responds to your state of passion. But perhaps there's an extra satisfaction in having a mutual need to react.
Right. Well, and trying to keep this PG, but if you think about it, one of the most enticing parts about having intimate relations with somebody else is giving them pleasure. Do you envision the companions? What's a robot orgasm look like?
I think it's simply a superficial reaction to persuade your partner that he's succeeded. There's no innate orgasm. I've
never faked one myself, but I can imagine lots of women have. So maybe 50% of this population already knows how to do that.
Well, I believe there are men who fake orgasm. But we won't go there.
Wow. Well, all right. So the kids can come back in the room now. We'll keep it clean for after this. I have one of those little warnings on my podcast, so we're allowed to get a little dirty in all this thing. But let's talk a little bit about. Let's get back to you as a writer real quick, and because we're coming up on the bottom of the hour here, I would really like to know your thoughts on writing. And you're a teacher of writing, and obviously you've inspired a lot of different authors over the years, I would think. But what advice do you have for somebody that's kicking around the idea of putting a book together and putting it out there and maybe doing the independent publishing thing? Are you independently published?
No, I'm published with Breaking Rules Publishing, which is a small traditional publisher based in Florida, and now there's a Europe division as well.
Uh-huh.
And
So how did you take the path into getting your work published? And you know, obviously there's a whole new world right now that's happening, which isolates us even farther, where we can't do book tours and we can't do things like that the old writers used to do. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with it all.
Well, I got into writing, first of all, by taking the creative writing course. By the way, I should explain that when I say I'm a writing examiner, I don't teach creative writing. I just teach writing for communication for foreign people.
Uh-huh.
But I got into it, first of all, through taking the creative writing masters, and then by sending off stories to magazines. One of them, the one which published the largest number of my stories, was The Scribe, which is produced by Breaking Rules Publishing. And that led me to think that maybe they would welcome something longer from me. And as it turned out, they did, for which I'm very grateful.
Well, and that's actually, I think at one point in history, that probably was the more common way to get a book found, but that's actually not as common these days as because finding a job writing for other people and then selling them on the idea of a larger book, that was pretty good. I'm actually thoroughly impressed by that.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people publish independently now.
Yeah.
And it has its advantages as well. How I'll publish my next work, I don't really know at this stage.
Yeah. Well, did you find that one of the reasons why I loved doing the independent publishing thing, particularly for my book, was that, you know, I got to keep the creative processing in there, and I got to say, you know what, I'm gonna write it this way, and I'm gonna take the storyline this way, and the characters are gonna look this way. Did you have to give up some of your character or some of your creative juices in order to be able to please the publisher?
No, I wrote it exactly the way I wanted to, not having told them about it in advance, and then sent it off sort of on spec, and they accepted it.
Presumably at some point we will all go back inside and we'll eat together and we'll go to church together and we'll do all those things. But yes. If not, we have the well, if you think about it, like the Star Trek was the inspiration for a lot of this, the shuttle missions and stuff like that. So maybe the Dawson Junior is going to come down the pipe at some point because you wrote it.
I hope so.
Well, we'll see. But you're going to have to read the book to find out how it ends. Hey, Wag, I totally appreciate you visiting with me this morning, but we have to end it because we have gone way over time on this thing. But Dawson Junior 3G, where can we get this book?
It's available on Amazon or from, well, if you're in America, the best bet is getting it from Amazon. If you're in Europe, you can also get it for Breaking Rules Publishing Europe website.
Aha. Well, then you are going to run out and get this book, because when we come out of COVID-19 land, you're going to say, boy, I never want to go back there again, especially when I look at what's going to happen in Dawson Junior G3. Brian, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Christopher. It's been a delight.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and you can enjoy it every week. On Fridays, we launch this broadcast at noon, and it is always the best half-hour conversation you're going to hear on the web about some of the coolest books and some of the coolest authors, and that is why this is the Authors Exchange. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next week.
The Grand Canyon is viewed as one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and we have opened up our home to share the natural wonders and the beauty of this area.
Experience the Hualapai culture with GrandCanyonWest.com. GrandCanyonWest.com. Book your adventure at thechartedlife.net/oddnews today.